Welcome to Comcast Newsmakers. I'm Donna Richardson, and my guest this hour is Senator Brian Bushweller. Senator, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Senator, in the last legislative session, medical marijuana legislation was introduced, but we didn't hear a lot about it. Do you think that with the new session that's going to start up in January, that it may resurface?
Yeah, I think it will. There was a bill in the 145th General Assembly, which is the one that finished in June. It was SB 94, if people want to go look for it on the internet and read it, that would have made the use of marijuana for medical purposes, for certain specific medical purposes, in Delaware legal. That bill, SB 94, never did come up for a vote. I think it was somewhat controversial in Legislative Hall, and I think the sponsors didn't yet see the votes in the Senate to bring it up, so they didn't bring it up for a vote. Now we have a new General Assembly that starts in January, the 146th General Assembly for Delaware. And it's my understanding that the sponsors have made some modifications to the bill and will be reintroducing it. By the way, it'll have a new number therefore because it's in a new General Assembly. But they'll be reintroducing it and to see how it might fare this time.
Now, with the legislator who introduced it, what was their motivation and how are they hoping that this law can benefit our community?
Well, the basic idea behind medical marijuana is that there is lots of evidence that suggests that people with chronic illnesses such as cancer and who therefore are experiencing pain or nausea in particular or a lack of appetite, either from the cancer itself or from the treatment for the cancer, do respond well in all three of those areas: pain management, nausea management, and appetite enhancement by the use of marijuana. So I think what the sponsors were looking for was a way to make it legal for people in Delaware to use this drug, marijuana, to address those issues. There is another side to the coin, of course, and that is that there are opponents to the bill who actually view this, though, as being more of a foot in the door for the full legalization of marijuana, as recently was tried in California. I think it was Prop 19. And so the opponents of the bill say, you know, we need to be very careful about this because really what's going on here is we're trying to promote full legalization. Interestingly enough, the opponents also note another thing, and that is that the drug that is in marijuana, THC, that there's actually a long technical term for THC, and I wouldn't try to pronounce it right now. But the THC in the drug is available by prescription now, and it's a pill form. So that's one of the arguments of the opponents. They say, well, the THC is available by prescription anyway, so why are we doing this?
But then, haven't there been documentation that the body works better when you're smoking the marijuana versus the pill?
The supporters of the bill believe that the body ingests THC better when it is smoked than when it's taken in pill form by mouth.
And with the failure in California, Proposition 19, do you think that will have any impact here in Delaware of how people will view this bill?
I think it probably won't have a lot of impact. To the extent it does, I think it would probably be among people who oppose the bill because California has had medical marijuana for some years now. And then, of course, after having medical marijuana, then they attempted to get Prop 19 passed. And it sort of supports the argument that really medical marijuana is a foot in the door for full legalization. So to that extent, I think it might have some effect here in Delaware.
Well, Senator, I want to thank you so much for coming in, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the legislation decides to vote on this.
Thanks for having me.
My guest this hour has been Senator Brian Bushweller. And thank you for watching Comcast Newsmakers. I'm Donna Richardson.
These are the kind of things, if we're serious, that are going to
Hello and welcome to Comcast Newsmakers. I'm Donna Richardson, and my guest this hour is Senator Brian Bushweller. Senator, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the legislative session is going to begin in a few months, but one of the things that I'm very interested in is finding out about the pending election reform and how you think that legislation is going to work.
Actually, we're going to start in about 8 weeks. In mid-January, we'll come back for the 146th General Assembly in Delaware. And one of the bills that I expect to be introduced early in session was also introduced in the last General Assembly. It was HB 198, if anyone wants to look for that online. And it's a bill that would create a mechanism for the popular election of the President of the United States, as opposed to what we have now, the Electoral College.
Right.
And personally, I find this bill very fascinating because it took some clever people some time to come up with a way of achieving this goal of the popular election of a president without actually having to change the Constitution of the United States, which is a very difficult and time-consuming process.
Oh, yes.
And what the bill would do, HB 198, now remember it'll have a new number
in
for the new General Assembly. Okay. Right? But in the past one, it was HB 198. What the bill would do is make Delaware part of a consortium of states, all of whom would agree that no matter what happened in their own state with regard to the election of the president, in other words, no matter who wins in their own state in the popular vote, their electors to the Electoral College would go to Washington and vote for whichever candidate got the most votes, most popular votes nationwide, as opposed to the most in their own state. What that would mean, of course, is, for example, that let's just say, well, let's go back to the 2008 elections when President Obama won in Delaware. Let's just assume, though, for the moment, that Senator McCain had won more popular votes nationwide than Senator Obama. In that case, Delaware's electors would go to Washington and vote for Senator McCain, even though Senator Obama had gotten more votes in Delaware. And in that way, it's the popular will of the majority of the people in the United States who would determine who the president's going to be, rather than the current Electoral College.
And I know the backers of this bill feel that in 2000, with all the issues that were going on in Florida, because Senator Gore had more popular votes, the outcome would have been different and we wouldn't have had to possibly bring in the Supreme Court. But how do the opponents feel and its impact for Delaware?
Well, I actually don't think that the 2000 election is a driving force behind this idea.
Okay.
Although it is a fact that once all the votes were counted in the 2000 presidential election, had this bill been in effect at that time, then Vice President Gore would have won the election because he got more popular votes than President Bush did in 2000. But I think the real motivation behind this bill is a much simpler and sort of much more fundamental notion. And that simply is that America is a democracy. It should be the will of the majority of the people that decides who our president is going to be.
Right.
And they look at the proponents of the bill look at the Electoral College and say, that may have been good in its day, but today, with all our mass communication, modern communication, and so forth, we really should just have the people electing the president by the most popular votes in the nation. Now, there are opponents to the bill, and I myself, for example, have not yet made up my mind exactly how I would vote on this when it comes up. But one of the arguments of the opponents is that it would cause candidates to ignore Delaware, because they'd be going to the big metropolitan areas across the country where they can get the most votes to win.
Well, we want to follow you on that and follow the new session and see how things turn out.
Okay.
Thank you. My guest this hour has been Senator Brian Bushweller. And thank you for watching Comcast Newsmakers. I'm Donna Richardson.